Hi, everyone. I'm Ken Fisher of Atigro. Welcome to our virtual coffee series, Leading Apps to the New Normal. Today, we focus on tips and tricks for using LinkedIn Sales Navigator. Our strategic partners in my company, Atigro, have put together a series to address issues. This week, we're going to hear from the Pro Resource team, Judy Schramm, Richard Helmer, and Anne-Marie Bebout. They're the LinkedIn experts, and we'll focus this week on performing target searches to find and contact individual prospects, enhancing your prospecting techniques, optimizing advanced search, recent updates to Sales Navigator, and optimizing practices for managing leads using lead alerts in the inbox. We'll wrap up with an update on the latest on SBA programs and a question and answer period from our favorite U.S. Small Business Administration officer, Rod Johnson. I'd like to take a moment to thank our sponsors. These sponsors have made it possible to reach the community as well as provide support for these events. In addition to our partner sponsors, we have two community sponsors for this event to help us spread the word, the Special Needs Alliance and the Tysons Regional Chamber of Commerce. If you feel we're providing a service to the community, please help us spread the word. See an upcoming event email, please send it to others. If you see one of our LinkedIn posts, please like and comment on it. We greatly appreciate it. So I'm going to spotlight Rod, turn it over to you. And Rod, what's the latest and greatest from our wonderful Congress on what they've been doing for the SBA programs and what SBA has been doing to implement that?
What has happened since the last time I was on? We have a new forgiveness form that's now called the 3508S form. So if you recall from the last time, we had the 3508EZ form and the 3508 long form. Now there's the 3508S form, okay? And for the past couple of days, I've been trying to work through the 3508S form and the 3508EZ form to see what the differences are. So then I could come on to programs like this and say, well, if you are a single member LLC, a sole proprietorship, or a 1099 contractor, scrap the EZ form and just use the S form, okay? I'm almost at that point to say that you can do that. It'll probably take me another day or so to definitively be able to say, if you're one of those three, just use the S form, particularly if your loan amount is $50,000 and below, okay? So in a couple of days, I should really have that figured out, since I'm supposed to be the expert at this. We've gone over with, hopefully the stimulus package will be about $2 trillion, okay? And so with that, there will probably be a change in the forgiveness rules. Now, there has also been talk, I don't know if you've heard this, but there has been talk since the average loan size was about $110,000 that they may, with this new stimulus package, let's keep our fingers crossed, that they will raise it from $50,000 up to $150,000, okay? Little Birdie has told me that that's still a part of the negotiations for this new stimulus package. So if that's the case, then hopefully they won't change any forms on us, that we'll still be able to use the 3508S form for loans $150,000 and below, okay? Now, this is a shout out for the CPAs. I am urging all companies to use CPAs to help you fill out the forms correctly, because once you turn in your forgiveness form to your bank, there's no going back to make any corrections. There we go. So we have the loan forgiveness basics. Now, one of the questions that people ask is, tell me the difference between the covered period and the alternative covered period. A lot of business owners still have questions about that. And so as you see here, borrowers are eligible for forgiveness in an amount equal to the sum of the eligible cost and payments during the 8-week or 24-week covered period. So let me define covered period, which is the covered period begins when money is dispersed, okay? Or you have the alternative covered period, which begins on the first day of the next pay period after disbursement. So the firms that use this are people that pay on a weekly basis and bi-weekly basis, okay? So that's your alternative covered period. So now what are the eligible costs? And I go over this because I keep getting questions about what are the eligible costs. So the payroll costs, of course, are eligible. And as we know, that 60% of the money is supposed to be used for payroll. Now, if you're a 1099 or single member LLC, it's okay if you use 100% of the money to pay yourself. That's perfectly fine. In fact, it makes it easier because since you're just paying yourself, then there shouldn't be any reason why you should not have your loan 100% forgiven if you've used 100% of the funds for payroll. And hopefully what has happened is you receive the PPP money, you've put it in a different account. When you pay yourself, you write a check off of that account, you deposit it into your personal checking account. And so what you're going to supply to the bank is the statements that held the PPP money, the bank statements where your personal bank account statements where the money went into, and you'll have a copy of the canceled checks. Okay, so
Rod,
that's, go ahead.
a quick question there. So as a business, if you use the longer pay period, it's almost certain that you can account for most of the loan, if not all of it, as payroll. So is it better to go for the longer period and just put 100% payroll and not worry about, well, it's internet's really phones, maybe a utility, this is a lease, et cetera, et cetera. Here's a proof of the lease. Seems like the payroll paperwork would be a lot easier to show. And sounds like you're saying it's going to be pretty much a slam dunk.
Actually, yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Thank you.
I would. I certainly would. Okay, yes. All right, so now the business rent payments. And the lease must be effective prior to February 15th. And that's a key date because people are saying, oh, what about March or April? No, it's prior to February 15th, 2020. Okay. And so we know that, and here's the other thing, let's make sure that you actually include a copy of the lease. When you make that lease or rent payment, you have to have a copy of that lease as a part of your documentation, as well as showing the bank statements showing that, actually the lease or rent payment has come out of that account. And it's the same with the mortgage interest. It's the same with the utilities, okay? You must be able to show that those funds were used. So it should be showing on the bank statement that, those funds were used for those particular purposes, right? Rent, lease, mortgage interest, business telephone, the internet, okay? And of course, payroll. So let's make sure that you can prove that. Now, what you want to be able to do is also attach, if you get a bill every month, you want to be able to attach that bill as part of your documentation for the internet, for the telephone, for the mortgage interest payment. You want to be able to show the invoice and the bank statements as part of your documentation for that. For this whole loan forgiveness process, it's all about the documentation, okay, to prove how you've used the funds.
Rod, quick question. When the salary wage reduction can be no more than 25% during the covered period, compared to what? Compared to, because it used to be compared to the previous year?
So well, it's what you started out with. So whatever, let's just say that you supplied the 941, okay, to get PPP. So that's the number that you're using. So if you can't be reducing people's salaries by more than 25%. Now I've received questions about, well, what about 35%, 40%? No, it's no more than the 25% reduction.
And that's,
okay.
That would usually be the previous year for the 941 compared to the previous year.
Yeah,
Okay, great. Thank you.
previous quarter.
Oh, previous quarter.
940.
Previous
940 is the
quarter.
annual.
So if you got it in April, it would be in the first quarter of that year?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
All right. So here's what's important, because I still get questions on this. So what's happening is a lot of the bigger banks are staging the forgiveness process. Okay. And so they're informing you of when you can actually apply for the forgiveness process. All right. So you have all your documentation, you submit it to the bank. Now, the lender has 60 days to review your application to say whether or not it's 100% forgivable, 80, 90%, whichever that it is. Okay. That's 60 days. Then the SBA has 90 days to make a determination on the loan forgiveness. And then the SBA will then in turn let the bank know that, okay, it's 100% forgiven, 50%, 80%, or not at all forgiven. And they will inform the borrower of that timetable. Now, just keep in mind that the loan shows as a liability on your balance sheet. And then if it's 100% forgivable, or whatever percentage of the loan is forgivable, it will show as extraordinary income on your income statement. Okay. So this is what, October. So what the earliest is February or March that you'll find out whether or not your loan is forgiven. What I can imagine is that a lot of CPAs are going to be doing a lot of business extensions on March 15th. Okay. That's what I actually envision at this point, particularly if the new stimulus package is approved, because I'm sure there are going to be changes. But right now, this is the process. 60 days the bank has to review the owner submission. And then the SBA has 90 days to review the bank submission. But please, please get this right. Get your calculations right the first time, because there is no going back and making any corrections. So get it right the first time. Because I did ask that question and internally, and they said, just let everybody know to get it right the first time. Now, as you see, borrower documentation requirements, we went over it just a second ago. So for the payroll, proof of payment, right? Non-payroll, proof of obligation and proof of payment, right? That invoice, that's your proof of obligation. The 3508, the PPP Schedule A and FTE documentation. So your FTE documentation is going to be your 941, okay? And then for the 3508 EZ, that's going to be the same FTE information. So if you had 30 employees, you still kept 30 employees, fine. If you lost an employee, what you want to do is try to hire to bring your count back up to 30. Make sure that you made an offer letter, it's signed off on, the person started. Now, if you were bringing back employees and your employees were sitting at home eating bonbons, making more money because they were getting $600 a week on top of the regular unemployment and don't want to come back, make sure that you've made an offer letter to them. They've signed off on the fact that they don't want to come back, so that you can submit that with your paperwork so that you won't be penalized. All right. Now, as the bottom says, and I think this is going to stick whether or not the stimulus package changes things. All loans over $2 million will be subject to SBA loan reviews, and additional documentation will be required. And they haven't told us what that additional documentation is yet. I keep hearing internally that additional documentation will be required, and just more to come on that. So just know, 2 million and above, you're going to really be scrutinized. That's the long and the short of it.
And Rod, just to clarify, you said the S form kind of replaces these. Is that, just want to reiterate if I'm understanding that correct?
Well, you know what? They have 3 different forms, right? The 3508S, I think that came out 2 weeks ago. Mm-hmm. The original 3508EZ, and then the long form. I'd like to think, which is why I'm really working both forms, I'd like to think that the S form, if this new stimulus package is approved and they say 150,000 and below, the loans that are 150,000 and below will be, forgiven, then all you will use is the S form. That's what I'm hoping. But for right now, the three forms are in play. So the 3508S is for those loans that are 50,000 and below, okay? And then you'll use the EZ. And what I'm telling people is for the EZ, then if you're a single member LLC, a 1099, or a sole proprietorship, still use the EZ form. And then of course, if you're a larger company, then you're going to use the long form. So right now, the three forms are still in play. What's driving the 3508S form is that your loan was 50,000 and below.
But
Okay.
maybe 120,000 and below if they pass.
Yeah, 150, yeah.
So we'll try and make sure to alert people of that in our email with the presentation. Okay, go ahead. Next slide.
So we talked about this, right? Documents must provide proof of eligible costs, right? Bank statements, your third party, right? Payroll service provider, whoever you're using, Ceridian, Paychecks, ADP, your tax forms, which is, your 941 or 940, and payment receipts, right? So make sure you have all of those to go along with your bank statement so that you can prove that you've used, the money properly, particularly for payroll. So payroll really is the easiest thing because you have your 941. Okay?
Right, but
that's your documentation. That's easy. Okay.
Right. So just to clarify, if you're only going with payroll or mostly payroll, you still need the bank statements and you still need documentation from your payroll system in addition to the 941, or is just the 941 sufficient?
Well, you should probably have your 941, and I'll probably have the bank statements to show the transaction. Okay. Those two things. Yeah.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right, non-payroll, which we talked about earlier, right? So you should have your lease agreement and receipts, the amortization, and this is important for the interest payment. Either you can run an amortization schedule. I probably have my bank, if you can get them, to run the amortization schedule for the business mortgage interest, because you want to include that along with being able to show that you've made the payments, interest payments on that mortgage. And then for, the utility payments, as it says, invoices from February 2020 and during the covered periods. Okay, so you want the invoices, you want the bank statement, you want a copy of the checks, which should actually be on the bank statement to show, right, that you've made those payments. For eligible costs, all right? So for those of you who have been calling me and saying, well, I wanted to hire a new business development person. I wanted to upgrade my web page. I wanted to buy equipment. And there have been people that have been using PPP funds to do just that, okay? Or they've been using the money to pay down existing lines of credit or term loans with their banks. And it's just, that's just been driving me nuts. And so I said, well, there are people that are actually getting prosecuted for misuse of PPP funds. So please use the PPP money for payroll at a minimum 60% and for the allowable cost or expenses, please. I don't want to read about you in the Washington Business Journal or Washington Post.
So this is very important. If you misreport, for instance, you could report it as payroll, you could report it as, buying a new copier. If you misreport, that could make you open to an audit or worse. It sounds like what you're saying. Is that true?
Well, yes.
Okay. Good to know.
So please use the money for.
And this is another reason to have a CPA checklist, it sounds like.
Yes, that's why in the beginning you heard me say, You know, don't be penny wise and pound foolish. Get an accountant to help you with this.
Okay, but don't put his charge on the forgiveness form.
Oh, well, you know what? We had some frequently asked questions. Okay. So this was a big question that's come up. Can the borrower submit a forgiveness application before the end of their covered period? And the answer is yes. Okay. And if the borrower reduced the annual or salary or hourly wage by more than 25%, the borrower must account for the reduction for the full covered period, which is either an 8-week or a 24-week period beginning on the PPP loan disbursement date. So remember, you remember when the program first came out, you had 8 weeks to hire people back and or keep them on the payroll. And in the 9th week, then you would apply for, forgiveness. Then on June 5th, 2020, the PPP, what was it, Flexibility Act? Yeah. Then they gave you the 24-week period to be able to, after the 24-week period, then you could go ahead, or anytime during that 24-week period, you could submit for forgiveness. Okay. Now, hopefully, again, you guys have not reduced the hourly wages or annual salary by 25%. I hope you didn't do that.
So basically, if we haven't done that, then the 24-week period is a better one to choose. It's kind of what you were saying last time you were here.
I would, but yeah.
And then put as much of payroll on that as you can, and make sure you're not putting any other expenses that are not allowed, because that could trigger, audit, handcuffs, that kind of thing, right?
Well, the SBA is going to catch it, right? Mm-hmm. Yes, and it will.
Okay.
And in fact, I've talked to a couple of people that are doing the first wave of forgiveness. And believe me, they're finding all sorts of unallowable costs, okay? So I just want to really stress, hopefully you've used the funds in the manner in which they're supposed to be used. There are going to be some surprised people to find out that none of the PPP will be forgiven because of the misuse of funds. I just want people to know the seriousness of this. All right, so here's what the lenders will do. You'll have approved in full, right? The amount requested by you, the borrower, and the forgiveness amount requested by the lender equals that amount. Then you have denied, okay? Just like I was talking about, the lender denied the entire forgiveness amount requested by the borrower because of the misuse of funds. That's generally the reason why you're going to be denied, is because of the misuse of funds. All right, then you're going to be denied without prejudice. Now, the lender uses this status when the SBA notifies a lender that a loan review is pending at the time the borrower submits loan forgiveness application. Okay. And then you have approved in part, which is, I think, going to be the majority of the cases. The lender did not approve the forgiveness amount requested by the borrower, and the decision amount by the lender is less than the forgiveness amount requested by the borrower. This is what I think we're going to see more of, because just in the sample size that's come into the SBA, a lot of people haven't followed the rules. So it won't be surprising that only 50%, 60% of what's been requested by the borrower will actually be approved, because again, people have not been using the funds in the manner that the program specifies. Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm just giving a heads up that don't be surprised if 100% of your PPP loan is not forgiven. The good part is, the loan is at 1%, okay? And you'll have up to 5 years to pay that loan. So that's the good part, it's at 1%.
Rod, one thing here is key, it seems. Lenders make the decision, not the SBA. Is there any appeal to the SBA if you disagree with the lender?
Well, actually, ultimately, the SBA makes the decision. The lender is just the first look, if you will. The
Okay.
SBA is the final decision maker.
So the SBA can overturn the lender, even
Yes.
if the lender denies it. Okay, that's really good to know. And is there any chance to appeal or discuss this with the SBA, or, you know, most of the communication is going to happen with the lender, as so far
Yeah.
has been the case?
Yeah, it's going to be with the lender. Yep.
So it sounds like it's really important to have that good relationship with your loan officer at the bank, and take them out to coffee, but don't put that coffee on the forgiveness application.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Okay, great.
Okay. And here's what it says here. See, if the loan is selected for an SBA loan review, which of course it will, the lender will be notified via the forgiveness platform. And we have a platform that will be letting the lenders know. So the lenders may send us a file of, say, 2,000 forgiveness, and our guy will look at it, or girl will look at it and go through all of them. And then they'll report back through the portal on the loans that have been forgiven, those that have been partially forgiven, those that have been denied. And then your bank will turn around and actually communicate that back to the borrower. So that's actually the process. And please don't call the SBA. All the calls seem to come into me. People find my number from across the country. And so please don't call me asking me, well, where's my loan in the process of being forgiven? Because I won't be able to tell you, okay? And for your local lender, give it 5 months before you call your local lender and ask them where is your loan in the process of being forgiven, okay? So don't be calling them every week asking that question. All right, so this one is key because I get a lot of questions on this EIDL. So if you remember, you can do both the EIDL and the PPP. So in the beginning, back in March and early April, companies were getting the EIDL loan first and then applying for the PPP. What the banks were supposed to be doing was, for the EIDL advance or grant, they were supposed to be subtracting that amount from the PPP loan. That's the way it was supposed to work. However, when we got into later in May, June, July, people had actually applied for the PPP and then the EIDL advance. Well, the EIDL advance wasn't subtracted from the PPP. So now here you are, you're going to ask for forgiveness. Well, the SBA is going to make that adjustment for the EIDL advance on the back end. So therefore, you may not get a 100% forgiveness because that $1,000 to $10,000 EIDL advance wasn't subtracted. So if you had a $100,000 loan, you got a $10,000 grant from EIDL, okay, then you're only going to have, well, 10,000, you'll only get 90,000 that's forgiven, and you'll have a loan of $10,000 at 1%, okay? And I think that's important for people to know.
Okay.
Not much is being talked, a lot of people are not talking about that, but I'm giving you the inside scoop here and how that's going to work.
Okay. And this is only for the EIDL advance. If you have an EIDL loan, nothing's subtracted from PPP.
Right. That's correct. It's just if you got the EIDL advance.
Okay.
Okay.
And the EIDL loan, also, we talked about this last time, has a lot of restrictions, not just on the use of the money, but the use of any money in your business. For instance, you cannot give out bonuses, I believe. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And
that's correct. Because see, under PPP, you could use, that money. Let's just say you didn't use all the money. Under PPP, you could call it hazard pay. You could give a bonus, to use up all the money. Under EIDL, no, you can't do that under
EIDL, regardless of where the money comes from, not just the EIDL money itself, correct?
Right.
And so the how will that be looked at? Will there come a time where we have to account for our expenses of the business entire time, the entire 30-year period, we have an idle loan if we do that, or or is it just going to be, be careful and, random audits or that kind of thing?
I would be keeping good records, because remember, we can come back 6 years later and do an audit.
Okay. So, but presumably there's no form to turn in any
there's
time you're idle. But you need to be very aware of the restrictions of use of your money in the business during the idle. I think it's for 1 year after you repay the idle even. Is that correct? Or is that just during the idle?
Well, you have 12 months. You have I shouldn't really call it a free period, but you have 12 months before you start making your principal and interest payments.
Right, but do the restrictions apply during the time you have the money and you've paid it back entirely? Or is it also a period after that?
No, it's not a period after that.
Not, okay, so it's just, during the time you have the idle money, you have to look carefully at the fine print in the idle contract, because there are restrictions on using the money, not just the idle money, but any money in your business. You have restrictions on that, on how you use money in your business, correct?
Yes. Now, let me also say this. So let's just say that your company is growing and you go to your bank and they say, well, wait a minute, you have an idle loan, okay? Because with idle, remember that the SBA has taken, well, I'll call it a blanket lien, but it's a UCC1, it's a blanket lien. And so the lender's not going to make that loan to you unless they're in the first position, okay? So what you have to do is submit the banker information to the SBA through the idle portal, okay? So, and the SBA is willing to do this, and that is subordinate their first lien to the bank so that you can get the loan that you need to grow your business, because we're getting a lot of requests for that. Secondly, there are companies that are buying the smaller companies, so an M&A. Well, remember, you have to get permission from the SBA because there's going to be a change in ownership, okay? So again, you need to get, if it's an idle loan that you have, then you have to contact the SBA, and typically it's going to be a 90-day process. If you have a PPP loan, then you have to work with your bank, and the bank will contact the regional SBA office to get the approval for that M&A to go through. And again, that's a 90-day process. So for PPP, you go to your bank. For idle, it's through the SBA portal, okay, where there's an M&A concern. Because that's coming up a lot. Okay. Now, this one, the long and the short of this one is, if the PPP is not forgiven in full, then the customer has a loan. It'll be on the lender's book, and the lender must service that loan. And again, it's at 1%, and you'll have either 2 or 5 years to repay that, to repay that loan, again, at 1%. Now, the lenders are not going to be happy about it. Why? Because they don't have a personal guarantee. They don't have any collateral. So they're not going to be too happy with having a loan at 1%, because they're actually going to be losing money on it because they have to service that loan. Okay. So, unfortunately, that's a byproduct of if the loan doesn't get, totally forgiven.
Well, from our perspective, it gives the lender an incentive to help you get forgiveness. So that's to me a good thing.
Yeah, but realistically, it's for the way that people have been using the funds lately. Like I said, a lot of these people are going to find out that 100% of the loan is not going to be forgiven.
Right. And let me look at chat to see if anyone has any questions. I didn't see any questions earlier on LinkedIn, so I think it's going to be all yours. Someone has a client with a bank LLC and PPP loan. He or she wants to move the LLC to another bank. The existing bank is reluctant to release the lien with the PPP loan staying. Are they off base in their thinking? Second question, are the PPP loans being traded between banks?
No, that's a nightmare.
Okay, so no to, they're not being traded, but are, is a bank off base and being reluctant to allow a LLC loan to leave and the PPP loan to stay?
You got the PPP loan primarily by the relationship that you already have with the existing bank.
Mm-hmm.
So, that banker is not going to be happy that you leave them stuck with an unsecured loan while you take the other part of the business somewhere else.
Right. So
they're just not going to be. So I wouldn't do it.
You wouldn't do it.
In other words, I wouldn't move the LLC relationship to another bank.
But from the client's point of view, do they have a right to do that, or is that kind of not in your?
I mean, they can. It's just not a good thing to do.
Okay, it's not a good thing for the bank to do, or not a good thing for the
client to do. For
the client to do, because the bank will be unhappy.
Yeah.
Hurt the relationship they have with their bank.
Yep. Yep.
Okay. If a loan is not forgiven and goes into default for inability to pay, who is at risk, the bank or the SBAs?
Well, ultimately, us, the taxpayers, because we're going to have to pay for that.
Well, I think in this case, our children's children will have to pay for that.
Okay. Because, all right, so let me explain. So remember, if these things default, then the SBA is going to step in because we gave the banks the incentive to do these and underwrite them the way that they did, with no personal guarantees and no collateral. In exchange for that, the SBA says we'll be the backstop and make you whole 100% if the loan goes belly up. Okay. So if it does that, then ultimately us, the taxpayers, are going to be paying for that bad loan.
Okay, right. So it's okay. That answers the question. Okay, and just clarifying one thing. And
somebody's go ahead.
Okay. Brady, did you want to add anything to you emailed me a private question. Did you want to unmute and add anything to that question, or does anyone else have any questions for Rod here?
The key is, please, I hope you have used the money in the way that the program was designed, which was to retain employees and then to cover some of your business expenses. So 60% for payroll at a minimum, 40% for the other expenses. And please do not, I hope you haven't used the money to update your website, to pay down any lines of credit or term loans with your existing bank, and for hiring a business development person, because these are the things that I'm hearing the most of how the funds are being, PPP funds are being used. All right, that's a quick way for you not to get the loan forgiven. Okay, so please use the funds in the way that the program was designed, and do not color, as I say, outside of the lines.
So I just want to make a general request to everyone. I think this presentation has been one of the most useful that Rod's given, because he now has answers. He didn't have answers before on some of the exact things that you need to do to get forgiveness. And so I really encourage you, when you get the email for the download of the slides and the YouTube presentation, please send it out to people who have these loans. I think a lot of these really salient points that Rod made are very important for people to understand. Okay, well, thanks so much, Rod. Thanks everyone for attending. Thanks for your questions. Really appreciate it. Please keep an eye out for the link to the video and the slides. I think this will be really important for everyone to let people who have these loans know about, because the big thing is that there are problems for you if you send in an application with unapproved expenses. Those can really come back to bite you in a big way, it sounds like.
Yes.
So thanks so much, Rod.
Yeah.
Okay. that concludes it. Please stay tuned. Keep an eye on your email for our next session in the series. We have a lot of things in store that we're working on, and I think you'll be very happy to see those. And of course, we will have Rod back as often as he likes to be. Thank you so much. And thanks, Judy and her team, for their presentation as well.